Welcome back to the stream. I am so happy to be back live with all of you guys after a few days off. We have had a very productive few days on my end, and I'm not quite ready to reveal everything, but big announcements coming on how we can revamp everything related to our channels, the show, and just get you more content, more stories in a much more effective way in the second half of 2024. I've been meeting with my YouTube team. I've been meeting with all kinds of people, giving me great feedback on everything that we've been doing this year. And we're taking all of your guys' suggestions into consideration. So we took a few days off from the stream so that we could have all of these productive meetings. And I am just so excited to see where everything goes from July forward. We'll just put it that way for all of our channels. But as always, I'm so happy to be live with all of you guys and hanging out all together as one big community across all of our platforms. We are live on YouTube, Facebook, Rumble, Getter, Instagram, Locals, and Rumble. I always forget one there at the end. And I'm so grateful for each and every one of your support as we continue to grow these channels one day at a time, completely organically. I know we've been growing a huge international audience over the last several months, which is good because today is a very internationally themed stream. We are talking about Japan's catastrophically low fertility rate and that of all of the developed world, all across Europe, Australia, New Zealand, and the United States. And then we're going to be ending the stream with a crazy emerging story out of Canada and the Canadian Cancer Society trying to redefine cervical cancer to, and I'm not making this up, front hole cancer. To be more gender inclusive, apparently. It's a really weird Pride Month around the world. We'll just put it that way. But I'm so excited about all of the positivity that I'm hearing from you guys and the hope that I'm seeing all over the world with people saying, I'm a little tired of the insanity. I particularly am very hopeful this month, regardless of all of the insanity that we see and talk about every day, because to answer your question, Soul Brother 79, my wedding is at the end of this month. I'm getting married in 18 days, which is honestly kind of shocking, and I still have a lot of stuff that I need to do, so knee deep in the midst of wedding planning, but very, very excited to start this next chapter of my life and bring you guys along with me on the journey as we continue fighting for a better trajectory forward for Western civilization and really the whole world as we know it. We desperately, desperately need marriage and family now more than ever before. And I feel incredibly honored to be just a tiny, small part of that journey and what it looks like for our generation as we reclaim these values of marriage, of parenting, of the nuclear family, and putting our families before the government in society again, and just fighting for goodness and morality and beauty again in our broken and often evil society. I've heard you guys loud and clear over the last couple of weeks that we are tired of so much negativity. I am tired of so much negativity and reacting to just insane things on the internet all day, every day. So as part of our transition in how we are going to be revamping some things with the show in the second half of the year, we're going to be taking you along on a much more positive note, really building the blueprint of what society should look like moving forward and trying to bring as many people along with us in that journey as possible. But that entire journey starts with acknowledging where we are today, where everything is going wrong, and how we can be fighting back against it. And that's exactly where I want to kick things off today with the emerging news from just a few days ago that we are facing as a globe imminent population collapse and decline, particularly in countries like Japan. So let's kick things off talking about the declining fertility rate around the world. And as we are doing that, I want to say hi to a few people to get things kicked off and started today. So let us know who you are and where you're watching from in our chat. While you guys are doing that, I want to give a huge shout out to our amazing friends over at Public Square, our headline sponsor of the stream, who helps to make everything we do possible. You guys have heard me say it already, but I'm so grateful that during the midst of Pride Month, when so many companies are just being absolutely insane and caving caving to everything that the woke mob wants them to say or do. Public Square, which is a network and database of more than 100,000 small businesses all across the country that are all pro-family, pro-faith, and pro-freedom. Public Square is instead focusing on true masculinity and Men's Mental Health Month, which is historically what June has always been. So if you are looking for businesses to support that share your values, look no further than publicsquare.com. Saying hi to a couple people before we jump into the Japan story on fertility. Over on locals, we've got Alex, we've got MRock, Nitty Witty, and Red 4 kicking things off for us in our chat. We've got Total Package, Amy, Big Snap, Miguel, Northern Wanderer, Jackal, and James Small, among others, over on YouTube. My Quillwin farmer, Caleb, Cujo, and Jim are on Rumble. We've finally got on Instagram a whole crowd of you guys. Salem is watching from the United Arab Emirates. So cool. We've got people watching in Poland. Sean is in England, Sweden, England, India, Switzerland, South Africa, the Netherlands, Pennsylvania, Dubai, Canada. Sorry, Canadians, for throwing you under the bus in advance on this stream. It's just a little insane. Matt's watching in my home state of Colorado, where I'm getting married this month. I'm super excited to be going home. Florida, Norway, Dubai, Ireland, California, Saudi Arabia, Belgium, and more. I love you guys. Thank you for being a part of our community. And please do me a huge favor as we continue to grow our channels totally independently with not a cent of advertising behind it, one person at a time, by smashing that follow or subscribe button and joining our incredible family of truth seekers around the world. Okay. Let's talk Japan. First of all, I have somewhat of a vested interest in this at the moment because my sister is actually doing an internship in Japan all summer. She spent the whole spring semester studying abroad in Europe and had unbelievable adventures living out of Sevilla in Spain, which is one of her favorite cities. And I'm really proud of her for that. And then she randomly ended up getting this internship opportunity with a travel and gap year company. And she is spending the summer in Tokyo, flying all the way back for my wedding in Colorado and then all the way back. But over the course of about 8 weeks, we'll be living in Japan. She's been there for a few days and says it's just amazing and has really had a wonderful experience so far. So I was looking up, Japan related things anyway for my sister and her experience getting to live there this summer. If any of you guys are watching in Japan, keep a lookout for my sister because that's awesome. But I came across this story that started going mega viral on Twitter, which we will always dead name. I will never be able to get on board with the X thing. If you guys watched the stream last week, you remember why. But this story started going mega viral on Twitter last week that Japan's birth rate and fertility rate fell to a record low, the lowest the country had ever seen. And it's at the point now where they're actually dramatically concerned that Japan as a society, culture, country may just cease to exist because so few people are both getting married and or having children. At the exact same time, fertility rates are hitting an all-time low in Japan. The marriage rate is also dramatically falling. The Japanese government reported through their internal data just a few days ago that the country's birth rate actually fell to a new low for the 8th straight year in a row last year in 2023. Their health ministry data that was released last Wednesday, less than a week ago, showed that the government is actually describing the situation as critical and is urging authorities to do absolutely everything they can to reverse the trend. ABC News reported the data underscores Japan's long-standing issues of a rapidly aging and shrinking population, which has serious implications for the country's economy and national security, especially against the backdrop of China's increasingly assertive presence in the region. According to the latest statistics, Japan's fertility rate, defined by this particular statistic as the average number of babies a woman is expected to have in her lifetime, stood at only 1.2 last year. 1.2. For the record, the replacement rate for any population, it obviously stands to reason, is 2.1 births per woman. In order to replace the population, to replace your parents, 2 people, every family needs to have at least 2 children. And Japan's fertility rate is currently sitting at 1.2. So quite literally, their society is cutting itself in half, generation after generation after generation. In 2023, less than 1 million babies were born in Japan total. 727,000 babies were born in the entirety of Japan in the entirety of the year 2023. To put some of that into context, Tokyo, as the world's largest city, carries 7 million people on their metro system every single day. Every day, more than 7 million people alone take the metro in Tokyo. And yet they had less than 1 million brand new babies born in the entire country in 2023. And what's really, really scary is that rate from 2023 was actually down 5.6% from the previous year, the lowest since Japan started compiling birth rate statistics at all in 1899. So between 2022 and 2023, there was a massive, staggeringly scary decline in the number of children born in Japan. Interestingly and separately, the data also shows from Japan's health ministry that the number of marriages in the country is also dramatically falling. And this is worrying scientists quite substantially. The number of marriages fell by 6% from 2022 to 2023, almost the exact same statistical decline as the number of babies that were born. And it's something that authorities say is a key contributing factor, a key reason for the decline in the birth rate. In the predominantly traditional Japanese society, out-of-wedlock births are very rare because generally people prioritize traditional family values, waiting to have children until you get married. But if nobody is getting married and the society remains quite traditional, then nobody is having children as well. The chief cabinet secretary, Hayashi, in Japan said to reporters that this is a critical situation and quite literally, Japan as a society may just cease to exist if they cannot reverse this dramatically decreasing rate of both marriages and childbirth happening year over year in their country. So fascinatingly, the Japanese government is coming up with a solution for this, introducing a taxpayer-funded dating app specifically with the intention of trying to normalize marriage, trying to get people to fall in love again, and to want people to want to have children. There are tons of other incentives that they are pouring into increasing the birth rate in the country as well. They're attempting to widen access to childcare services. They're expanding parental leave benefits. And the government actually earmarked about $34 billion or 5.3 trillion yen as part of their 2024 budget, specifically for those daycare and childcare services, for paid family leave, and is expected to spend about $23 billion in tax money annually over the next 3 years for incentives for existing married couples to have more children. I don't know that a dating app necessarily will work in terms of trying to get people to get married, but it is an interesting idea, an interesting concept and proposed solution, because at the very least, they are realizing the inherent connection in Japan that simultaneously marriage rates and birth rates are substantially falling at almost an identical rate year over year over year. So it stands to reason that people not getting married is clearly an inherent factor into why people are not having children as well. And this got me thinking about what all of the statistics must look like around the world at the exact same time. Because in America, all across Europe, I hear from all of my friends in Canada and Australia, in New Zealand, marriage is currently being demonized, both by radical left-wing feminism for women, saying that marriage is some sort of patriarchal, toxic masculinity trap that's going to hold all women back from achieving their career goals, that's going to hold you back from having a personal life or going on vacation or having friend groups, etc. But it's also being sold that way to young men, ironically, from this supposed right-wing red pill community, that marriage is a trap for men, that you are going to be hooked into this horrible financial obligation for the rest of your life. You shouldn't be tied down to just one woman in order to assert your manhood, your alpha male status. You need to be sleeping with as many people as humanly possible. You should never let yourself get tied down to a single woman. And we also know that marriage rates in the last couple of years in the United States, largely because of this societal propaganda to make people think that they should never get married, have fallen to an all-time low in the United States of America. In fact, in the last few years, we actually hit the lowest marriage rate ever recorded in our country since we began recording marriage rates in 1867. And as a result, I'm not at all surprised when I see headlines like this, that our fertility rate as well dropped to the lowest rate in a century, as birth rates overall dipped in 2023. CNN reported this in April, just a few weeks ago, that the fertility rate in the United States has been trending down for decades. And a new report shows that another drop in births in 2023 brought the rate down to the lowest it's been in more than a century. Stands to reason to me that the clear attack on marriage and the clear decline in the number of people getting married in the United States and the Western world at large is clearly correlational to a drop in the number of children we are having as well. In 2023 in the United States, there were about 3.6 million babies born, according to the CDC and the National Center for Health Statistics. The fertility rate has fluctuated in America over the last several years, largely because of COVID, but there was a 3% drop, not quite as substantial as the 5.6% drop in Japan, but a 3% drop still in America between 2022 and 2023, bringing the rate to the lowest level in more than 100 years. The birth rate fell the most among different age groups in 2022 and 2023. In fact, the highest birth rates over time have been shifting towards women in their late 30s, whereas before it used to be with women in their 20s. So women in their younger childbearing years are having less and less and less children in the United States because we're putting children off. We're not incentivizing marriage. We're not incentivizing lifelong commitment to another human being. And because of that, you're looking at an entire generation of women waking up in their late 30s, even into their late 40s, saying, God, I really messed up. How can I try to have a child now? Which is incredibly difficult and not at all possible for some women out there because their bodies just can't naturally conceive at that point, which makes the fertility rate exceptionally low. This is trending across all 50 states, by the way. If you look at a graph of the United States birth rate over the last several decades, this is since 1990 fertility rate, according to Pew Research, it's trending with every single state since 1990 as well. Utah having still a lot of babies compared to the rest of the country, but you're watching this overall dramatic slump since 1990 to 2020 in the number of children that are being born in the United States for women who still can actually conceive. So it got me thinking at that point, we're seeing this in Japan. We're certainly seeing this in the United States. Is this a trend across the entire world? And if so, what implications is that going to have on the future of humanity? I can't tell you how many times I have heard over and over and over again that the world is going to literally end imminently in the next 12 years. And can we refresh ourselves, chat? When did AOC say that? Like 8 years ago. So we're running up on the clock here. The world is going to literally end in the next 12 years, largely because of the fancy word that we've all heard a million times, overpopulation, like the SpongeBob imagination. Overpopulation is destroying the planet, and it is your civic duty. It is your moral prerogative and obligation to the next generation of people to not have children. if you have kids, you hate the environment, you hate the globe, you hate your fellow man and women, and you do not want them to survive because it is irresponsible and morally bankrupt to bring new people into the world and new mouths to feed as we face imminent population explosion. How many times have you heard we're not going to have enough food to feed everybody on the face of the planet? How many times have you heard that we need to figure out substantially radical new urban farming techniques because the current agricultural setup that we have is not sustainable to feed everybody over the next 200 years? How many times have you heard that the earth is just going to spontaneously combust because everybody's having too many kids and the world is quite literally about to explode? I can't even begin to count. I hear it every single day. And everybody points the finger at Elon Musk when he says, no, actually, we're having the opposite problem. We're facing imminent population collapse, but it's because this trend is not being talked about anywhere. Maybe in reference to Japan every once in a while going viral on Twitter, but I hear little to nothing about this in the mainstream media, despite record low fertility rates in Japan, well below replacement rate. Record low fertility rates in the United States, currently below replacement rate. Record low fertility rates across Europe, in some countries, well below replacement rate. This is from Euronews in May of 2024, just a few weeks ago, that in 2022, the number of live births in the European Union reached its lowest level since 1960, according to the latest available data. That year, only 3.88 million babies were born in the EU, marking the first time the figure fell below 4 million. The fertility rate also declined, nearing levels last seen 2 decades ago. The EU had one of the lowest fertility rates in the world, which has been on a downtrend consistently since 1960. If you look at the number of live births in the EU, here's 1960. Number of live births, 6.66. 2022, 3.88. Lovely. Keep in mind, remember what we said about the replacement rate of fertility, that it was at 2.1 in order to replace your parents. Every family has to have at least 2 children. The highest fertility rate in Europe in 2022 was in Georgia at 1.83. Everything else is dramatically lower. Malta down here is at 1.08. The general consensus for the EU, 1.46. It's a problem in Japan. It's a problem in the United States. It's a problem in the European Union. It's a problem in Australia. Australians are having fewer babies. Experts say it could have way more consequences than we realize. Recent data from the Australian Bureau of Statistics has revealed Australians are experiencing a near record low fertility rate. The data found that Australians are likely to have an average of 1.6 babies over the next 5 years, well below the replacement rate of 2.1. The Guardian recently reported that New Zealand's fertility rate hit a record low as births continue to fall. New Zealand's fertility rate slumped to a record low in 2023, official data shows. Statistics NZ data released on Monday found that there were 1,932 fewer babies born in the year 2023 than in the year before, the lowest number of registered births in 20 years. The drop was despite a 3% increase in the overall number of women between the ages of 15 and 49 years old, the ages at which most children are born. The combination of fewer births and more women in the population led to the fertility rate hitting a record low of 1.56 births per woman. And even in developing countries that our media often credits as being the main contributing factor towards overpopulation, countries that desperately need as many resources as we can possibly give them because they are overpopulated and cannot sustain agriculture enough to feed everyone, there are dramatic drops in fertility in those countries as well. How many times do you hear in the media, Africa is so overpopulated, the entire continent is so overpopulated, how are we going to feed all of these developing countries that don't have the agriculture in order to feed themselves? Yeah, here we go. Graph of African population growth, which is higher than the rest of the world, but is still dramatically decreasing. That top green line that is going exponentially down, sub-Saharan Africa. A decrease in the demographic growth rate, the rate at which the population is rising, has already begun. The world is not facing imminent overpopulation. Rather, to the contrary, the world is facing a global fertility crisis, imminent population collapse, and basically no one is doing anything about it, with the exception of the Japanese government trying to do whatever they can, down to creating a dating app to make people want to fall in love and have babies much, much, much more regularly. Interestingly, the definition of the fertility rate is the number of live births to women of a specific age during a year divided by the average annual population of women of that age. So when we're talking about fertility rates, we're talking about how many babies are born compared to the population that's able to give birth to babies, essentially. But we're not really talking about the contributing causes that go into a massive decline in fertility rates, which made me really think, why aren't we studying that? Obviously, personal choice is a huge contributing factor to this, knowing that people are not getting married, they're not wanting to have children, they're waiting until much later in life to even think about wanting to have children, which means they're probably biologically incapable of having as many children as we normally would have expected in the last several generations. But personal choice can only be a small piece of the pie in terms of the total number and contributing factors to why people are unable or unwilling to have kids in the first place. How much of this has to do with toxins in all of the stuff that we wear, that we slather on our skin, that we breathe in the air every day, that we eat in our food? How much of this might have to do with the massive presence of plastics, microplastics, in like every single thing that we touch, consume, breathe, etc.? How much of this might have to do with the abortion industry and our inability to even think about having children because we are normalizing stuff like Plan B and emergency contraception? How much of this has to do with hormonal birth control pills, which every expert ever swears has nothing to do with fertility rates later on down in life? But we've never actually really researched that with long-term societal use of regulating your hormones and removing your body's ability to conceive a child for prolonged periods of time, sometimes even decades, over decades, like most of the women in my generation, having been prescribed hormonal birth control for everything related to acne, heavy periods, pain in your periods and cramping, etc. How much of this has to do with low testosterone rates in men and sedentary lifestyles that make it very, very difficult to naturally conceive a child? I mean, how many contributing factors are leading to this idea that we are facing a global fertility crisis, and other than personal choice, nobody is even remotely asking about it? Not to get way too technical and too personal, because it's not my story to tell, but I can't even begin to tell you how many of my friends, cousins, people in my personal life are having the most difficult time ever conceiving a child. In America today, more than 1 in 4, 26% of all pregnancies are ending in miscarriage. And that's even if you are lucky enough, quite literally, like winning the lottery at this point, lucky enough to get pregnant in the first place. I have countless friends that are very, very, very much struggling to conceive a child when they desperately want one, which tells me that this global fertility crisis collapsing with profound economic, societal, familial, spiritual consequences on the world as we dramatically see demographics cease to exist on our planet, it probably has a whole lot more to do with those external factors than we realize. And certainly is contributed to by personal choice, but that can't exist that way in isolation. Think about it this way. Since the Industrial Revolution, the population of our planet has absolutely exploded. Absolutely exploded. Access to technology, ability to streamline things in our lives, making humanity's existence much easier, and our ability to focus on other things has allowed for the conversation about potential overpopulation to thrive over the last several decades and generations. But before the end of this century, forget about the last several centuries, before the end of this century, the number of the people on this planet could substantially shrink. We could see that massive 8 billion number shrink before the end of this century for the first time in human history since the bubonic plague. Not because of a plague, although that certainly could happen in the next several decades. Not because of some world-altering event like nuclear warfare or a meteor or something crazy. Because of fertility rates alone, for the first time since the bubonic plague, our world is going to see the global population, the total gross number of people on this planet, shrink within the next few decades. How insane is that? And it's reported by even extremely left-wing news organizations that don't want to promote the family, that the root of this is not a surge in deaths. The cause of this is not a surge in deaths, but instead a slump of births. In 2000, the world's fertility rate was at 2.7 births per woman. Growth. A net positive for humanity, comfortably above that replacement rate of 2.1. But today, globally, the world's fertility rate is at 2.3, accounting for every single society known to man, and is dramatically falling. The largest 15 countries by GDP, so the most developed and economically thriving countries in the world, all have a fertility rate below the replacement rate, including China and India, largely because of policies like the one-child policy in China. Even the world's biggest socialistic and communistic economies are not replacing their current population. This is scary stuff. So I see everybody asking in the chat, well, then what do we do about it? How do we even begin to combat this? It's honestly really simple. And some things are going to be beyond our control. Obviously, we can't control the number of toxins in our society at large based on our individual decision making. I wish we could, but that's a longer play for humanity. There are a lot of extenuating circumstances like pollution and toxins and the food that you eat and all of that we can talk about any other time. But the solution to all of this is really, really very simple. Fall in love, get married in a society and culture around the world that is demanding you never want to get married, and have a lot of kids. In the simple words of Public Square's sister company, Every Life, which is the world's first pro-life diaper company, make more babies. Sounds pretty lit to me. I mean, that seems like a pretty great solution to all of this insanity. And I certainly hope, God willing, that will be a part of my story as I get married in the next couple of weeks and in the next few years. Think about what that means for my potential family and bringing more life into the world. But that's the solution. Make more babies. Nick Cannon and Elon Musk can't hold the fort now all by themselves. Let's be honest. But it also is so much bigger than that. It's resurrecting the beauty and the importance and the stability of the family. It's understanding that there is a design for a society that's thriving. And as our society falls into the abyss off the cliff because we quite literally can't reproduce enough to replace our current population, there is a desperate need to analyze what has worked throughout all of human history and what is clearly not working now. This directed, targeted, intentional attack on marriage as some sort of outdated institution and something that we should never want to embrace or strive for is clearly contributing to the literal downfall of humanity. And I don't know who needs to hear this today, but women, marriage is not some sort of patriarchal, man misogynistic trap on you and your trajectory in life. It's not intended to hold you back from your career. It's not intended to take away your personal life. It's not intended to ruin the trajectory of your girl bossness. And men, I don't know who needs to hear this today, but marriage is not some sort of financial trap where you're only going to be exploited by this horrible leftist woman for the rest of your life. And the only way to assert your dominance as a man is to sleep with as many people as humanly possible, drive fancy sports cars, and say really trashy things with porn stars all over the internet. Marriage is a beautiful, thriving, lifelong opportunity for the closest intimacy and emotional connection that we could ever have with another human being. It quite literally mirrors our relationship with God and how Jesus was willing to lay his life down for all of humanity. We are embracing the same opportunity to lay our lives down for one another. It is a gorgeous, amazing, inspiring, enlightening journey that we should all be excited to go on instead of going along with the lies of society. How do we fix the global fertility crisis? Really simple. Fall in love, get married, make more babies. Period. Full stop. I want to switch gears now into our other story to cover today. So sorry in advance, Canadians, if you happen to be watching the stream. We are about to throw all of you under the bus. Not you, I suppose, but your country. And I just want to touch base, chat, any Canadians who might be watching. Are you guys okay up there? I've been to your country twice, both for very short trips, and I'm hopeful to go back. I would really like to take a trip through Alberta and go skiing and experience the mountains. Everybody says I would absolutely love it. I've been told by so many people I would love Calgary. I would love Banff. So eventually I will be making a trip up there. But so far I've only had the pleasure of visiting your lovely capital city and Toronto, and that's it. Both have been interesting experiences, wonderful, patriotic, amazing, traditionally valued, truth-seeking oriented Canadians. But I just have to ask if you are okay, because there is this emerging story from the Canadian Cancer Society in the last few days that makes me wildly concerned for your well-being. H says, no, we are straight up not okay. Shadow says, nope, we are not okay. Yeah, okay, so good to know. We're sending thoughts and prayers. We are trying to annex Alberta in particular. I have proposed that we trade California for Alberta. I think everyone would be much happier in the long run for this, but I sadly have seemed to have fallen on deaf ears with this proposal. Anyway, 3 days ago, the Canadian Cancer Society, the top cancer charity in your country, officially changed their website related to cervical cancer to include a new subsection on their website about trans people getting cervical cancer. Now, I want to be abundantly clear as we begin this conversation. I have 2 degrees in biomedical sciences. I took human gross anatomy twice, so I've spent a lot of time analyzing the physical structures of the body. A cervix is a very important key aspect of the female reproductive system. Of all of the cadavers that I've had an opportunity to engage with over the years, of which there have been many in my human gross anatomy classes, not once have I ever seen a cervix inside of the body of a man. But that doesn't really seem to matter to the Canadian Cancer Society, who had to create a whole new subsection of their website in the last couple of weeks and has now had to apologize for it, that men, in fact, do have a cervix. At least trans men have a cervix. But this is where it gets really confusing. This is the Canadian Cancer Society's webpage on cervical cancer that has since been archived. They've removed this from their website publicly. Luckily, we know how to find archived things on the internet because nothing really goes away on the internet. Fun fact that they've now had to apologize for. But here's what they say. Words matter. Words matter when we talk about cervical cancer. We recognize at the Canadian Cancer Society that many trans men, women who identify as men, but men, and non-binary people may have mixed feelings about or feel distanced from words like cervix. You may prefer other words, such as front hole. We'll come back to that. We recognize the limitations of the words we've used while also acknowledging the need for simplicity. Another reason we use words like cervix is to normalize the reality that men can have these body parts too. So you heard it here first. The Canadian Cancer Society, the top cancer charity in all of Canada, has affirmed that men, they don't specify what kind of men, just men, can in fact have a cervix. News to me, having taken years of human gross anatomy and physiology and developmental biology and just all of it. Yeah. Men can have a cervix, and just in case you're uncomfortable with the word cervix, we've come up with this lovely alternative that we think you're going to really like. Front hole. First of all, ew. Like, ew. Who says that? My skin is like, I can't. The words, I should say, front hole to describe any part of female anatomy is the biggest ick factor I've ever heard in my entire life, particularly from a cancer charity. But I also have a question. As someone who's taken years of anatomy, I'm a little confused what the front hole is. Anatomically, chat, can anybody begin to describe to me where the front hole is? Because first of all, your cervix is not really accessible as a whole to the outside world, in case you didn't know that. If anything, they should call it the inside and up hole instead of the front hole. But there are multiple options here. Is your front hole supposed to be your cervix? Is your front hole supposed to be your urethra? Is your front hole supposed to be your vagina? I think we all can presumably understand what the back hole is. I hope I understand what that means. If not, I have royally failed as a scientist. But what? What if we label the cervix the front hole and all of a sudden the urethra wants to identify as the front hole? What if we labeled the cervix the front hole and the vagina wants to somehow spontaneously identify as the front hole? Seriously? What about your belly button? Anybody? Do men not have a front hole? I hope. They gotta pee somehow. But notice how it's never men's genitalia that's changed. It is never men's reproductive system that needs a whole rebrand to be welcoming and inclusive to everyone else. You will never hear men refer to their urethra or any other part of their anatomy as their front hole. Only women put up with this crap. And I just have to ask, why? Why do we continue allowing this insanity? Why are we okay with this? From a cancer charity. I posted a video about this on Instagram and somebody commented that their wife had just died from cervical cancer. And I hear stories like that and I think to myself, how unbelievably insulting that you can create a whole section of your website about how, well, cervical cancer isn't really cervical cancer because men can also have a cervix. And just in case you want to call it something else, we recommend front hole in Canada because we're just so nice, eh? Well, no, actually, you're wildly insulting and specifically doing everything you can, you being the proverbial authoritarian left, to erase women at every single potential opportunity. Men get to be men. Men get to have a penis. Men get to have testicles. Men get to have whatever they want. But women have to be birthing people, or chest feeders, or people who menstruate, or people with a front hole. apparently. And instead of being grossly disgusted by the intentional erasure of half of the population with what I can only describe as internalized misogyny, feminists everywhere are applauding this, are cheering it on, are saying, look how wonderful, welcoming, and inclusive we are to all women, even women who are better than us as women because they are men. Feminists are applauding men landing tampon brand deals. Feminists are applauding men winning Miss Maryland USA, which just happened a few days ago. Feminists are applauding men joining sororities, men winning Women of the Year awards, men taking NCAA championship opportunities from women. Feminists are applauding the erasure of Title IX in the United States, in which men can just sleep in a woman's dorm room. Men can take women's scholarships academically or athletically. Seriously? This is just where we're at. So the Canadian Cancer Society posts this on their website, gets unbelievably ridiculed all over the internet for it, and has since apologized for their viral blunder here. People started commenting all over the internet, well, I guess you don't understand what a frickin' cervix is, or I guess I am never donating a single cent to the Canadian Cancer Society ever again, who, just for the record, is run by one of these people with a front hole. So when I talk about women applauding this crap, this is the person with a front hole who runs the Canadian Cancer Society. And the organization eventually had to comment back to all of this backlash and say that this was a bad decision on our part. We shouldn't have said any of this, and we will archive this section of our website, which obviously they since have. But if you look it up yourself, you too can find this whole subsection of the archived Canadian Cancer Society website as a trans man or non-binary person assigned female at birth. What a long-winded way of saying woman. Do I need to get screened for cervical cancer? I said this on my Instagram video, but I'll say it with all of you guys. That might be it for me. Like, cervix as front hole, I actually might just be ready to move to the woods at this point. Goodbye, civilization. I'm done. I'm unsubscribing from the insanity. No, thank you. We will never, ever, 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 ever recover. But I still have hope. I still have hope because of the backlash that I see from stuff like this and people being willing to comment stuff on the internet like, I have a cervix and it's okay to say that. People being willing to stand up and defend womanhood despite being massively ridiculed and put through all of the hot irons of cancel culture as a result of it. People like J.K. Rowling being willing to be the queen TERF, as the leftists call you. That gives me so much hope for the future of society, being willing to just do the very simple reality of telling the truth again, which is exactly what we try to do here on the stream every single day, regardless of what we talk about with the crazy stuff going on in the news, regardless of what we might touch upon politically, regardless of if you guys happen to have the same religious worldview as me or anything in between. I hope that you walk away from every single episode of the show knowing that we did everything we could that day to just tell the truth in a world that is rejecting that very concept. And I hope that you guys will take the opportunity to do it yourself every single day in your own spheres of influence too. The easiest way to be discerning through all of the noise and chaos of everything going on in the world, to find truth, I have found, is through prayer and the author of truth himself, God. And I cannot begin to tell you how much our other sponsor of today's video has totally transformed my prayer life. Hallow is the world's largest Christian prayer app with more than 10,000 prayers, guided meditations, podcasts, mental health resources, and more. Hallow just began a brand new series that is called The Journey Through John, in which we are going through the entire Gospel of John, and it is so unbelievably good so far. It's narrated by Jeff Cavins, and the aspects of scripture that are actually read out loud are narrated by Jonathan Rumi, who plays Jesus in The Chosen. We are 2 days in, and it has already shaken my core. It is so freaking good, and I cannot recommend it enough. Hallow is truly transforming how the world is learning how to incorporate prayer into your daily routine. And I cannot recommend that you guys check them out enough. You can go right now to hallow.com, HALLOW.com/Isabel, ISABEL. And they are so generously offering a 3-month free trial for every single aspect of content on their platform. If you have felt a remote tugging at your heart to want to incorporate prayer as a better part of your day-to-day routine and you just don't really know where to start, please, I beg of you, try a week, 2 weeks, a month of daily guided prayer on Hallow, and you are going to feel like a totally different person on the other side of all of this. Closing out the show, I just want to remind you we have lots of exciting changes coming. We're going to be switching up the format a little bit on how we give you guys content every day, but mostly to give you more content, more stories, more opportunities to engage with this community. We have heard you loud and clear as we are scaling the growth of our communities substantially, approaching 1 million of you on Instagram. We're well above 50,000 of you on YouTube now, well close to 500,000 on TikTok and everywhere in between. We are really excited about this next chapter of all of the stuff that we get to talk about as a global community of truth seekers every day. And in case you have any input into what you want that to look like, always feel free to direct message me on any platform. You can email me through my Instagram bio. There's a really easy email Isabel button that I actually read every single day. And we want you guys to be as much of a part of this next chapter of our community as possible in the process. So just in case you have not already, smash that follow or subscribe button to make sure you are here for all of it. And I cannot wait for you guys to see what we are up to behind the scenes. I love you guys so much. Stay dry out there. If you live in South Florida, we are apparently facing hurricane warnings. So that's a new development in the last 30 minutes. Pray for my silly self who grew up with 0% humidity in the mountains of Colorado and is now really struggling living in constant rain. So that's fun, but very excited about everything to come this month. Love you guys all so very much, and we'll be back for the stream tomorrow at 3 p.m. ish Eastern time. Bye.